On behalf of the International Forestry Students Association, I'm honored to officially open today's dialogue. It's already 9 a.m. here, like even though I'm Indonesian, but since I'm in Germany, I have to do it German way, like have to be on time. And I'm honored to officially open today's dialogue, Bridging Science to Policy Transfer in the Forestry Sector. And my name is Sakari Yunita. And I will be your moderator for the session. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Göttingen and research associate at the EU project Small for Good, and also serve as the External Council's Commissioner of IFSA. And today's event is held in commemoration of the International Day of Forests. And each year, this day offers more than just a celebration of forests. It is eventually a moment for like a forestry student like me to reflect on the increasingly complex roles that the forests are playing. So for me, like forests are not only vital for biodiversity and climate regulation, it's not only a carbon sink, but forests are also entangled in difficult conversations about, for example, like in my country, about land use, about economic development, about indigenous rights, and also global equity. And recognizing the value of the forest, and also like recognizing the value, like the multiple value of the forest, it means actually grappling with these tensions and finding ways to navigate them through informed, inclusive, and evidence-based approaches. And this year's topic for our IFSA Dialogue, and also like our first IFSA Dialogue during this term, while varied across local contexts, resonates with a shared need, which is to turn knowledge into action. And that means connecting research with decision-making, and then education with implementation, and also youth with leadership, which is also like what we are doing here in IFSA. And that is also exactly what this dialogue aims to explore. So thank you all for being here, for dedicating your time, and for later on also bringing your perspectives, your questions, and also your commitment to the future of our forests. And so thank you once again for being here with us. And without further ado, let's officially open today's event. And I'm honored now to invite the president of International Forestry Students Association, Teresa Clara Loth, the PhD candidate at the University of Freiburg, to give opening remarks. Teresa, time and place is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks already for the introduction, Seka. Yeah, my name is Teresa Clara Loth, or simply Reza. I'm the current president of IFSA, and at the same time a PhD student in forest policy at the University of Freiburg, also based in Germany, so it's also 9 a.m. for me. And it's a pleasure to welcome you all to today's dialogue. First of all, Seka already said it, but I would like to thank our speakers again for taking their time to be here today. We are very excited to have you and very grateful for the opportunity to learn from each other and also to take the time to actually discuss among each other. As a student association, of course, we believe that young people have a crucial role in shaping the future, not just in the years to come, but also right now. As forestry students, we are actively building the knowledge and skills that will allow us to contribute to the sector in many meaningful ways. However, we know that the transition from knowledge to action is not always straightforward. The connection between science and policy is often unclear, and this is what we will discuss today. But so when even strong research exists, it's not always easy to actually translate it into effective decision-making. That is why we are here today, and this discussion is so important, and I'm glad we chose it as a topic for today's IFSA Dialogue. So how do we bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and real-world policies? But also, how do we, as young people, prepare to engage in these processes? And one key part of this answer, and Seka already mentioned it shortly, lies in education. Universities and research institutions are not just places where science is produced, but they are also a place where we, as the next generation of forestry professionals, are shaped. So lecturers and researchers are more than just experts. They are also educators, mentors, and facilitators of knowledge transfer who lead us through our first steps of forest education. At the same time, we know that science policy transfer does not just happen in high-level meetings and official reports. It begins at the first step in the classroom, in the way we as youth are taught to think about forests, governments, and decision-making. Are we being equipped with the skills to communicate science findings beyond academia? Are we being prepared to engage with policy processes? And just as importantly, are we as students even encouraged to think about our role in bridging these gaps? At the same time, we also recognize that policymaking is very complex. Science is only a piece of the puzzle, and policy decisions are shaped by many factors, including political context and societal values. In some regions, policies remain focused on short-term solutions rather than long-term evidence-based strategies. In others, there are simply systemic challenges that limit how research can be integrated into decision-making. Understanding these challenges is a crucial part of our learning process. So if we want to see stronger links between science and policy, we must engage with these realities, not just in theory, but very much in practice. That means creating opportunities for youth to gain experience in policy discussions and developing the ability to communicate across different sectors. Today's dialogue is therefore not just a chance to hear from experts, but also an opportunity for us as youth to critically reflect on how we actually fit into this bigger picture. How can we ensure that future decision-making is not just based on good science, but also includes diverse perspectives? And what steps can we maybe take in our own education at universities and careers to help making this happen? So I hope today you will all take part in these conversations. In the time we have for discussions, please ask questions, open your mic, and use the space to learn from each other. Science policy transfer is not just a challenge, but also an opportunity for very meaningful change and an opportunity for us as youth to engage. So as young people, we do have the responsibility to be part of this process. So once again, thank you all for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussions ahead.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for the inspiring opening. I believe that IFSA's dedication to promote dialogue like this is what makes spaces like today possible. I hope you all can be like Riska and then like give like a bit of like this like emoji of like clapping or like the confetti, so that like it is more lively now like in the discussion, and then like to show it is a bit more youthly. Thank you, Helga. And yeah, we are going to hold more dialogues like this in the future, so please stay tuned in IFSA social media. And before we dive into today's speaker presentations, and I know that like many of you or like all of you actually are like very already like looking forward to it, allow me to briefly frame the theme or like the topic of our dialogue, so that like I could give you like a bit of like the thread to the discussion. So today's dialogue couldn't be more timely. We know already that climate change is not a myth. It is eventually just out of our window, and the role of forests has never been more critical. And forests are among the most powerful nature-based solution we have. They not only absorb carbon, but also strengthen ecosystem resilience. And not only as a carbon sink, forests, like in many parts of the world, contribute to local income and also economy. So to harness the full potential of forestry or like forests, we need stronger alignment between science, policy, and practice, ensuring that the many interests in forests, from conservation to livelihoods, are reflected in cohesive and evidence-based decisions. However, despite the wealth of scientific knowledge available, despite the accessible information, the gap between research and policy remains a persistent challenge. And in some parts of the world, policymaking continues to rely on expert governance, while in others, policies often address symptoms without long-term systemic approaches. And bridging this gap is not just necessary, especially in answering the defining question of our age, which is climate change. It is now becoming urgent. So that is exactly what we are here to explore today. This dialogue will bring together experts from IUFRO, from FAO, from the European Forest Institute or EFI, and also from Forest Europe. We will hear about the barriers that often hinder science policy transfers, the innovation that are helping to close these gaps, and the institutional roles in building better interfaces between research and decision-making. And we will begin with presentations from each of our speakers, and then we're going to have a Q&A session where I will read your questions that you have sent through Slido. So you could join us at slido.com when you are later on having a question. Please make sure to address to whom your question is. So for example, if it is for IUFRO, you put IUFRO and then your question, or FAO your question, EFI your question, and then Forest Europe your question. And we are going to have two Q&A sessions. So first Q&A session is after the two presentations, and then the other Q&A sessions at the end of the dialogue session. So now together, I hope, we hope, in IFSA, together we hope, we are making this, we are organizing this dialogue because we hope that at the end of this dialogue, we could reflect on how forest education and student engagement can play a role in shaping better and more informed policy processes. So now, without further ado, I know that all of you have been waiting for this moment now. Let's begin with our first speaker. Let's now welcome our first speaker, Dr. Michael Kirchner. I hope I don't butcher the pronunciation. He is my colleague actually from the University of Göttingen and also the coordinator of the IUFRO Working Party 90507. So for those who may be less familiar, IUFRO, or the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, is a global network of forest scientists structured around thematic units like the one that Dr. Kirchner coordinates. This work is further complemented by a range of task forces, programs, and projects that connect science to pressing global issues. So with that, and without further ado, I'm happy to hand the floor over to Dr. Kirchner.
Yeah, good morning to all. So I hope I'm allowed to share my screen. Here's the presentation. So I hope you can see the presentation now. So a warmly welcome to the IFSA Dialogue from my side, and thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Michael Kirchner. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Chair of Forest and Nature Conservation Policy at the University of Göttingen. And together with my research group at the university, my research focuses on knowledge transfer processes, or in other words, science to policy transfers. And I'm very pleased to support the IUFRO's idea of connecting researchers related to forests as a coordinator for the Working Party on science policy interactions. Science has developed exciting scientific knowledge, for instance, based on modeling results like maps with direct protection forests on the left side here on the slide, or below drone technologies for remote sensing applications. And on the right side, based on remote sensing applications, multispectral autophotos for tree health classification, or right below, a training tool based on an app which can be used in a telescope to train foresters. Yeah, most of us would be pleased if their research results would have an impact in practice and led to science-based solutions. And I'm convinced that your recent research results can make a decisive contribution managing forests in a sustainable way. And I would like to provide you with my presentation an overview about the topic of science policy transfer. And I will do this from a theoretical perspective and later on by practical recommendations on how to organize transfer processes from science to policy or practice. Now the next slide should come, but it doesn't work. I don't know why. Here it is. Yeah, my presentation is structured along 5 points. And first, I want to explain what science to policy transfer is. And second, I will ask what are the particularities of scientific knowledge and why is it needed? And third, I would like to ask what are the comments and differences between science and politicians or practice? And fourth, I will introduce different models of knowledge transfer. And as the last point, I would like to summarize my presentation by providing some recommendations for organizing science to policy transfers. Let's have a look to some expectations which scientists and politicians or practitioners might have on the science policy interface. In picture 1, you see scientists demonstrating to take their results serious and call that politicians take actions against climate change. In picture 2, in this comic, a scientist concludes that we are destroying the world. He was playing the effects and interrelations of a problem before, but data analysis, interrelations and correlations are complicated to understand for politicians. Both sides regularly appear frustrated during these exchanges, as can be seen when you are looking at their faces. What these examples have in common is they representing places where science and policymaking or practice meet, but these places are heterogeneous, being a complex patchwork, and where diverse interactions, interrelations, and interdependencies take place. Or I will try to say it in other words, at all these places, it is not guaranteed that the scientific knowledge becomes transferred to politicians. Therefore, it's easy to become frustrated there, especially if you are a scientist. To answer the question of what are the particularities of scientific knowledge and why is it needed, I would like to take up a citation made by Weingart. Here he states that the legitimation of scientific knowledge in the political process is based on its special epistemic position. But there are more characteristics of scientific knowledge that make it particular in comparison to other knowledge types. Scientific knowledge is characterized by a systematic context of order. It has the highest form of complexity, which means problems can be broken down into subproblems. Another important characteristic of scientific knowledge is methodical generation, the argumentative structure, and the fundamental epistemic orientation, which follows the organizing principle of freedom from contradiction and traceability. And furthermore, scientific knowledge has a fundamental openness and revisability of its statements through continuous systematic review. Or in the words of Weingart, it is an organized skepticism in it. Let us have a look at the political process and see where scientific knowledge can contribute. Following the model of the policy cycle, which aims to explain the policy-making process in an ideal way, scientific knowledge can be demanded in all phases of the policy cycle. For instance, in the problem definition where the existence of climate change was described, it was mainly made by scientists. Or if you look at the example of forest dieback in Europe in the beginning of the 1980s, it was accompanied by a lot of scientific publications influencing the political agenda setting. Yeah. Why do politicians need science? There has been an ongoing process in the past 50 years of scientification of politics. Many political problems, for instance, climate change or sustainability, can only be solved with the help of scientific knowledge, with scientific data. Governments strongly rely on scientific advice on a large scale, which is arranged in formal settings like expert panels at the ministry, or arranged in informal settings. That could be a direct contact between scientists and politicians, like in a conference. A second reason why scientific knowledge is demanded by politicians is the problem characteristic of many environmental and also forest issues. They often have a long-term and persistent character. If you look to the picture on the left, there is a bark beetle infestation and reforestation are needed with appropriate tree species. But which tree species should be selected is often an open question, especially for the foresters. Also, many uncertainties exist within an issue, or there are wicked problems. And you can see that the picture on the right, there is a windthrow in an object protection forest protecting the Brenner Railway in South Tyrol. The storm that caused these damages is linked to climate change and the increased occurrence of such extreme events. Therefore, problem solving is highly dependent on scientific knowledge, which is produced across the scientific disciplines. Another important point is that political decisions have to be made with time restrictions. Consequently, there's often only a small window of opportunity to solve the problem currently. This has also consequences for the transfer of scientific knowledge, which is only demanded when the window is open. But why does science need politicians or practice? The development of scientific knowledge is strongly dependent on sufficient financial resources. Scientists need research funds which are determined by the budgets of the research policy at a national level, as well on the supranational level, like the EU research funding schemes. Another important resource for research funding are political institutions or actors which fund specific projects. For example, the German Federal Ministry of Education and research funds research activities that fall within its responsibilities or competence spectrum. The current study of my colleague, Tobias Schäfers, revealed on the example of German payments for forest ecosystem services that science strongly depends on politicians or practitioners as allies to integrate scientific knowledge. In the political process, scientific information plays a subordinate role compared to other resources available to actors to influence decision-making. Science normally lacks the necessary resources to organize a successful transfer of knowledge. Only with allies in politics and practice can science achieve knowledge transfer. And therefore, we can observe the strong entanglements between science and politics in society. But what are the commons and differences between science and politics in society? First, let's see the common perspective of science and politicians. Idealistically, science and politicians aim to improve life for mankind. Or in other words, they must handle and solve a bundle of environmental, societal, and economic problems facing the great challenges of the world, like climate change or biodiversity losses, or to halt deforestation in the tropics, or to implement measures for climate adaptation in forests. But these comments are not sufficient to guarantee a mutual understanding. Obviously, there are several reasons why scientists and politicians don't understand each other, and knowledge transfer does not take place automatically. The comic here shows very nicely how frustrating knowledge transfer can be, at least for scientists. But alcohol might help sometimes. I will try to explain why a mutual understanding between scientists and politicians is more or less impossible to achieve. Let's have a look to the scientific system. First, I want to clarify what the task of scientists is, at least theoretically. They have to describe and explain the world by the production of science-based knowledge based on scientific methods and standards, and this is visible in all the publications scientists made. Scientists follow the criteria of empirical truth and logic to answer the research question and to test hypotheses. It is quite easy for a scientist to abandon his original research question and generate new hypotheses. Scientists also have the option of disregarding political aspects when answering their research question. But how it looks like in the political system? The task of the political system is to change the world by the production of collectively binding political decisions and taking different social interests into account. These decisions follow the criteria of political power and the interests that actors might want to realize. Political decisions should regulate the existing conflicts between the actors' different interests. And those decisions are regularly made under the conditions of uncertainty and limited time. Contrary to the finding that politics is becoming more scientific, the political system has little interest in scientific policy advice. The last characteristic I mentioned is directly related to my final comment, which is something to keep in mind when you are, as young scientists, in contact with a politician. Science is not a prerequisite for political action. They simply do not need scientists to make political decisions. I would like to give you a brief overview of the scientific discourse on developments at the science policy interface, which leads to a range of different models of knowledge transfer. Sokolowska in 2019 identified 3 major phases that describe the interactions on the science policy interface. On the left side, there is the linear phase, when science informs policymaking in a unidirectional manner. And on the right side, the interactive phase, when both sides find themselves in a continuous interaction. The latest development is the embedded phase, in which the voices of citizens are more explicitly included in the dialogue between researchers and politicians or practitioners. However, the concepts are by no means only a theoretical nature, but they have far-reaching effects on the actual organization of knowledge transfer processes. Numerous studies, specific instructions or recommendations, and experience reports are available for each individual concept of knowledge transfer. These are often reflected in calls for proposals for research funding, in which certain knowledge transfer concepts are directly or indirectly prescribed. I would like to explain one of these concepts more detailed, the research integration utilization model of knowledge transfer. This was developed by my former colleague Michael Böcher and Max Scott, and I further developed the model in my dissertation. The RIO model was applied multiple times in various national and international contexts and developed and also in developing countries. The RIO model is not based on a harmonic worldview. Instead, the model's main assumption is that the transfer of scientific knowledge should be based on a wheeled worldview, where different problem understandings, different interests, and power distributions among actors exist. The RIO model makes a clear distinction between the phase of research and the phase of utilization, which follows different criteria. For science, it means logic and empirical evidence, and for politicians or practice, it means interests and power. The difference between this model and other transdisciplinary or multi-stakeholder models of knowledge transfer is that three different independent phases of knowledge transfer exist. Research and utilization are connected by the phase of integration as an intermediate step for knowledge transfer with its own criteria. In the research phase, scientific knowledge is produced exclusively by scientists following scientific standards, methods, and principles. During the integration phase, researchers, politicians, or practitioners come together for the first time, and herein, scientific information is selected by actors as an interest-driven valuation process. Afterwards, the scientific information is embedded into the existing knowledge of an actor. The selection of the scientific information of practitioners or politicians take place in so-called integration forums, which are defined as formal or informal settings of practitioners and/or political actors to exchange science-based information. Within the utilization phase, an actor adds his or her own power to the selected scientific results, which lead, hopefully, to science-based actions in practice. In the utilization phase, science does not have any influence on practitioners' actions. Based on my conducted research on different knowledge transfer models and especially on the RIO model, I would like to make the following recommendations for successful knowledge transfer. First, knowledge transfer is often limited to very specific scientific information as on holistic approaches, which are often the aim of bigger research projects. Second, scientists should be aware of which actor is affected by a scientific solution or can affect the integration of scientific knowledge in a certain field. Therefore, knowledge transfer should be based on empirical data about actors. This means that during a so-called pre-analysis, relevant actors, interests, conflict, and the power resources of actors should be identified before organizing knowledge transfer activities. And third, the bidirectional selection process within the integration phase needs tailored scientific solution for individual actors. This means that scientific knowledge often requires several adaptation steps before it can be used by practitioners, and this is a time-consuming process. And as the last point to be mentioned, scientists or a rural research project consortium should be identify existing pathways to places where scientific knowledge can be exchanged or were exchanged in the past. In current research projects, we identified a huge set of existing integration forms, as well as hybrid integration forms, which we did not know before, and where we aim to get access to is in the projects. And of course, scientists might organize new integration forms, such as you all know, workshops or roundtable formats. When doing this, be aware of the different tasks and rationalities between scientists and politicians, and use the data gained by the pre-analysis to organize workshops and other new integration forms. These should be organized in such a way that different problem understandings, different interests, and power distributions between the actors are considered. For example, workshops should be organized separately according to the fundamental interests of the actors in the forest, such as the special workshops for actors with a nature conservation orientation and another workshops for actors with a use orientation in the forest. And thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your question and the question and answers round.
Yeah.
The other references I used.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kirchner. I would like to share my screens once again. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kirchner, for that comprehensive presentation and for highlighting how science and policy are eventually deeply intertwined, each influencing and depending on each other, yet they operate with different rationalities and also responsibilities. And while science offers evidence and understanding, policy is shaped by broader societal, political, and economic consideration, and as such, policy doesn't always stem directly from science, but the two must engage in ongoing dialogue to navigate complex challenges together. However, we also learned at the end that Dr. Kirchner has also highlighted some recommendations for knowledge transfer in forest science and integration of forestry research into utilization. I would like to invite you once again, like if you have questions, please go to our Slido, just slido.com, and then like write down the number code, or you could also like use this barcode to just directly go to the link of the Slido. And also like a bit announcement for those of you actually looking to get more involved in the science policy interface and also like in the work of IUFRO. Eventually, IUFRO hosts an annual internship opportunity where IFSA students support projects and programs at IUFRO headquarters, and the current call for application is open until April 7th. So please do check it out if you're interested. It's in the IFSA website and also IFSA social media. Check it out if you're interested in gaining hands-on experience at the science policy interface with IUFRO. So now, without further ado, we will move on to the next speaker. We are pleased to welcome Ms. Rocio Danica Condorgole, Forestry Officer of the Enhanced Transparency Framework from the FAO, or the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. For Ms. Rocio, the time and place is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share first the screen. So thank you, IFSA, for inviting me to this meeting. I also appreciate RISC and SECAR for preparing an interesting session. They help bring this topic to students and young professionals. So I'm Rocio Condor, and I'm Forestry Officer and Project Manager of CBIT Forest Project. You will learn a bit more during my presentation, but let's start. Okay, so let me start by sharing with you some key messages that I found useful when getting ready for this presentation and will justify the flow of my presentation. So as you know, the forest sector faces a series of challenges, including increased occurrence of extreme weather and deforestation, to mention some of them. Therefore, we need innovative solutions, collaborative approaches, and evidence-based policies that integrate scientific research to address those challenges. There is an urgent need to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing, to identify barriers and best practices, which will then help us to connect education, research, and policy. These connections are needed and will help us to strengthen the science policy interface in the forestry sector. Now I want to show you how the FAO links science to policy. I will also share insights about the forest sector. FAO recognized the need to use science and innovation to tackle global challenges. In June 2022, the FAO launched the first ever science and innovation strategy. Although FAO does not function as a research organization, it has the mandate to translate science and innovation into normative and policy guidance as well as practical tools for development. FAO has an important role in supporting the essential contributions of national, regional, and international research organizations. FAO's governing and statutory bodies provide an interface for science and policy. The Committee on Forestry, known as COFO, is the top FAO forestry body. The biennial sessions of COFO held at FAO headquarters in Rome, Italy, brings together heads of forestry services and other senior government officials to identify emerging policy and technical issues, seek solution and advise FAO and other appropriate action. Additionally, the World Forest Weeks take place alongside COFO, and it includes special events for FAO member states, partners, leaders, scientists, and youth. They come together to discuss important forestry issues. In this context, during the last COFO, the FAO Forestry Roadmap was approved, and out of the 3 objectives, one is focused on scaling up science and evidence-based innovation to increase the forest sector's contribution to global solutions and accelerate sustainable agri-food systems transformation. 7 guiding principles ground the science and innovation strategy, including right-based, people-centered, gender-equal, needs-driven, sustainably aligned, risk-informed, ethics-based, and evidence-based. FAO's technical work and guidance will be based on the most credible, relevant, legitimate evidence available, and this includes findings from scientific research in both natural and social sciences. The science and innovation strategy from the FAO builds on 3 interdependent pillars: 2 cross-cutting enablers, transformative partnerships, and innovative funding and financing, helping to catalyze action under these 3 pillars. The first one is strengthening science and evidence-based decision-making, supporting innovation and technology at regional and country level, and reinforcing FAO's capacity to better serve members. Also, the action plan gives us shared framework for action at country, sub-regional, regional, and global levels. Now, let's focus on one of these pillars, key topic for our webinar, and I will highlight the action plan's outputs, key areas of work, and examples in the forest sector. FAO, specifically the Forestry Division, is making important contributions through various teams, programs, and projects. Let me show you a bit more about it. The first output is a strengthened and innovative provision of data, statistics, information, and capacity support for monitoring a range of issues related to agri-food systems. The first area of work is to provide global public goods such as data, statistics, information platforms, and knowledge products at different levels. My first example is the Global Forest Resources Assessment, known as FRA. It's the world's most comprehensive source of forest resource information. It provides information for understanding the extent of forest resources, their condition, management, and uses. We conduct this assessment every 5 years. Stay tuned. In 2025, we will launch the FRA 2025 report and platform. The second example is the Food and Agriculture Microdata Catalog, known as FAM, which provides an inventory of data sets related to agriculture, forestry, food security, and nutrition. Check, for instance, the forest inventory data collection. You will find metadata, related publications, and platforms where data is shared. Some knowledge products include, for instance, the e-learning curriculum, Forest Monitoring for Climate Action. It aims to strengthen institutional and technical capacities. This will help meet the measurement, reporting, and verification needs under the UNFCCC. It will also support the transparency framework set by the Paris Agreement. These courses are free of charge and available in multiple languages. Another knowledge product is this publication, Grounded in Data. It provides a comprehensive overview of the role of national forest inventories in supporting sustainable forest management and informing international commitments. We have, lastly, pathways of forest data. This publication highlights success stories from Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean. This resource helps policymakers, researchers, and forest managers. It provides practical ways to boost national forest monitoring systems. This supports sustainable development and promote effective climate action. A second area of work is to develop and strengthen geospatial platforms and mapping at different levels. The example I bring is Open Forests, free open source solutions for forest monitoring and land monitoring. And these solutions actually facilitate a comprehensive forest and land monitoring, enabling effective measurement, reporting, and verification of environmental data to support sustainable development and climate action. We have the third area of work, which is to support capacities of governments in the collection, management, and use of data statistics for strengthened monitoring systems. And I have this first example is the project I'm leading, the Building Global Capacity to Increase Transparency in the Forest Sector, CBIT Forests, which has been designed actually to enhance the quality, timeless accessibility and usability of forest-related data in line with the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. A second example that is also available is this Aim for Forests, Accelerating Innovative Monitoring for Forest. It's a 5-year program that aims to support forest monitoring based on modern monitoring technologies and technical innovation, as well as on the use of space data and remote sensing. We have a second output that is a strengthened provision of and capacity support for rigorous analysis, studies, assessment, modeling, and foresight on a range of issues related to agri-food systems. The first area of work is to conduct science and evidence-based studies, analysis, and assessment at different levels on a range of issues related to agri-food systems. The first example that I bring here is the World's Mangrove Report, which provides global and regional estimates of the areas covered by mangrove forest, including area change between 2000 and 2020. And the goal is to better understand these drivers, how they interact, and how their importance has changed over time. The second example I bring you is the Dryland Global Assessment. It's a report first of its kind. It sets a baseline for future monitoring, and this will help countries find the right investments for restoring and managing drylands sustainably. The second area of work is to develop and promote tools, models, and methodologies to inform assessment, monitoring, early warning, planning, and forecasting efforts. The example is linked to this National Forest Monitoring System assessment tool that has been developed by FAO to support countries with performing through capacity assessment of forest monitoring. Self-paced courses are available to help understand the use of the tool. These include the course Forest and Transparency under the Paris Agreement, and also a second one that is called Institutionalization of Forest Data. The third area of work is to support policymakers on other agri-food system actors to develop science and evidence-based and contexts and policies. Here I have two recent examples of how we have been supporting and enhancing the institutionalization and transparency of forest data in Ghana, but also how we have been working together with Zambia to pave the way for advanced forest monitoring with innovative assessment solutions. The third output is sharing of knowledge, science, evidence, and experience on issues related to agri-food systems, enhanced through multi-stakeholder platforms, networks, and facilitation mechanisms. The first area of work is to establish and promote global and regional knowledge hubs, platforms, avoiding duplication. And the example that I bring here is the Global Fire Management Hub. FAO has led the development of an integrated fire management approach that helps to ensure that all fire activities are integrated into national policies and plans, are cross-sectoral and involve diverse stakeholders. The Fire Hub will enhance this approach, and it will support the use of principles, guidelines, and best practice created by scientists and practitioners over the years. The second area of work is to convene events and spaces for dialogue, exchange, and sharing on science and innovation. This event last year at IUFRO, Connecting Forest Data Transparency with a Robust Educational Program, was identified as a win-win, of course, and the talks during IUFRO, of course, show how we can empower a global community with the right knowledge and tools. Absolutely, we can advocate for and apply effective climate solution. Another example is this event at COFO, where it was showcased significant advances on forest monitoring. And it also pointed out ongoing challenges and opportunities in ensuring sustainable forest management. It also emphasized the need for technology, transparency, and international collaboration in achieving global climate goals. The third area of work is to establish, support, and participate in regionally balanced global regional networks, working groups to exchange scientific and technical expertise. This is an example which I'm closely working right now, the National Forest Inventory Network in the Latin America and Caribbean region. It brings together 22 countries in 5 territories, and it serves as a platform for them to work together on forest monitoring methods. They work together actually to collect, analyze, and share data on forest resources. And these created a regional network, a regional framework actually that improves decision making. Last but not least, we have this area of work to promote exchange of knowledge and expertise to strengthen local and traditional agri-food systems. An example that I show here is our Open Forest Ground. Is a free and open source user-friendly mobile application for field data collection. It's a simple, intuitive, and versatile, and Ground is designed for non-technical users such as smallholders, local actors, NGOs, or national and regional administrative bodies to track value change, monitor restoration activities, and many other applications. Soon, an e-learning course actually will be available for everybody. Last but not least, I have this output that is cooperation with and capacities of global, regional, and national local research organizations supported to harness collective impact and comparative advantage. The area of work here is to collaborate with research institutions, networks, and researchers at national, regional, and international levels to contribute to developing a shared research agenda. I have 2 examples here. The first one is the global assessment of our forest education. A survey was actually done for the first time to list ongoing activities, key players, goals, and achievements in formal education. The data collected by Global Survey on Forest Education, supplemented by the 6 regional consultations, represent a wealth of current information on the status and needs in forest education. And also this, as an example, is FAO and the IUFRO are celebrating more than 75 years of collaboration. Both actually organizations are committed to enhancing their work together at the time when science-based innovation holds the key to solving global problems. So some weeks ago, a task force on scaling up innovation in the forest sector was actually approved. Before ending my presentation, I want also to bring to your attention and highlight some key findings from the State of the World Forest. Innovation in the forest sector are likely to be most effective when they integrate science and traditional knowledge through inclusive practical approaches. So I'm showing here right now the 5 enabling actions that actually can encourage responsible and inclusive innovation that optimize forest-based solutions to global challenges. The first one is to raise awareness of the importance, of course, and create of innovation and create a culture that fosters innovation to bring about positive change. The second one, which is the focus of this webinar, is boost skills, capacity, and knowledge to ensure that forest sector stakeholders have the capacity to manage innovation. And this means support research and development to increase the evidence base on all innovation types for making progress in forest conservation, restoration, sustainable use. The other three are to encourage transformative partnerships, ensure more and universally accessible financial resources, and provide a policy and regulatory environment that incentivize, of course, forest sector innovation. As part also of the State of the World Forest, there was a publication, there was a case study, related to innovation and the field of work we have developed in the team. And I have to say that the capacity of countries to access and analyze, and this is just one of the examples that you will find in this publication, to analyze this satellite imagery to create land cover maps and collect sample data has improved greatly due to technical innovations and newly open source digital public goods that are now available. The science supporting remote sensing-based estimation of forest area has also advanced and leading to, for example, the use of sample-based estimates rather than pixel counts. And all this information has been also available. You can get this publication, but also the e-learning courses that accompany countries actually to build the capacity on these new findings and innovations that have been done. Last, it's just to conclude that and let you know that science and innovation is central for is a driving force for achieving a world free from hunger and malnutrition. And FAO has a series of roles. FAO can help connect science, research, and development. It supports science by working with data and creates innovation by geospatial platforms, for instance. FAO provides support to countries on innovative practices, approaches, methodologies, and tools, and it also supports science-driven innovative processes, platforms, and multi-stakeholder mechanisms. FAO can connect technical development and financial partners, and it brings together policymakers, producers, scientists, and innovators in agri-food systems. This all done through a shared global agenda, of course. Thank you very much for your attention. Visit our webpage, which has news, events, and resources. Stay updated on our work, publications, and free open solutions. Join our Forest Data and Climate Action LinkedIn newsletter and share it with your networks. I hope this information is useful for your daily work and studies. Each of you is an agent of change in connecting education, research, and policy. And this is to close. Let me just invite you to join the new online facilitated course, which is now open for registration, which is exploring the importance of institutionalizing a robust national forest monitoring system with a focus on transparency, sustainability, and data sharing. It will deliver in English, Spanish, and French. So take this opportunity. Thank you very much. Back to you, Zachary.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Rocio, for the very, very insightful presentation. And thank you for shedding light on the global landscape and FAO's catalytic role, but particularly in providing data, statistics, and capacity support to make information accessible and actionable for policy development. And also, like, what is very, very interesting is like how the facilitation to the regional cooperation to improve forest data quality, sharing, and transparency that is already taking place like in the South America. Thank you so much for that. And also, FAO doesn't only provide like the data support for the policy, but also like provide support for all of you, like students or like young professionals that are that would like to take your capacity building one step further with like the online courses that have been shared as well by our FAO colleague here in the chat. So you could just go to the link that has been provided in the chat and explore it yourself to learn more about the data support, and also like the what has been mentioned before is like the institutionalization of like the data transparency and like the policy support. So yeah, feel free to go to these links and also to take the online courses. Thank you so much. I think this is also very, very interesting for, especially for students and also for young professionals like us. And now moving forward, we are going to open the floor for a short Q&A session. This is our first Q&A session for our first two speakers, for Dr. Kirschner from IUFRO and also for Ms. Rosio from FAO. Actually, I have received questions as well, like in the chat, because in Slido they say that the characters are not sufficient. But we go to the Slido questions first, because there has been question there in Slido, I believe, yeah. And after that, like I will read the question as well from the chat. So yeah, feel free, like when you have questions, but it is not sufficiently accommodated in Slido, you could feel free to send me a chat, or like send the chat in the Zoom. But like if you want to be anonymous, like in this case, like there's like the anonymous question, then you could like send direct message to me. The first question probably will come back to Dr. Kirschner to give a bit break for Ms. Rosio. For IUFRO, in today's polarized world, how can we ensure science not only informs policy, but that real science is truly recognized in the process? And yeah, this is also like intriguing, because like what is like defined by like the real like science? Probably Dr. Kirschner, you probably have answer to that.
Thank you for this question, which is not simple to answer because it covers so many things, and that's a basic question how we could realize that. And this is what I have mentioned with this RIO model. We have to establish contacts between research and practice in a real world setting, and not to establish things outside of the world, like always establish new workshop formats, and to bring all these different actors together, which have so many interests that are not the same one. And here we should use the existing integration forums, where practitioners and also researchers exchanged scientific information in the past. And we have also to look to the background of the practitioners or politicians. What are the real interests behind? And if we can support the interests of these actors, then there's a more chance that it will be selected. I know this is not a very democratic process. This is the critiques we often received, but what we did as scientists normally do, we publish all the publication. It's available for all the people in the world normally, and especially if you provide it on different channels. But you have to look also to actors who have not the power to implement specific scientific information. Here we need additional allies, and this is also existing, that different actors come together and push a specific solution. And this I mean with the pre-analysis. If you're running a research project, if you have good scientific findings, you have to look what are the interests behind, what is the power distribution among the actors, and then select where you can go in, and which are the same interests, which actors could you combine with have the same interests, and find pathways to distribute your scientific information. This is how our model works, and we rely on this model, and we use it and explain this model also in different settings. In research projects, and our experiences are quite good, especially to find integration forms, to identify these integration forms, and to describe the different integration forms. There are so many around, and this I would recommend to do a real exchange process, and also that real science is recognized in the process. I hope I answered the question a little bit.
Yes, you answered the question, like especially as a PhD student like me, like I also learned like how, like when we are doing publication, there's also like this process, like this peer review process to actually like ensure that like what we produce like is not just something that we are blabbering about, but like it is like objectively consensual, agreed as a science, or like as a knowledge, as a credible knowledge, like in this process. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirchner. And next, the question from student at the Uni Göttingen for Ms. Rosio, I believe. Does FAO monitor how countries use the data and policy support it provides, and what does uptake usually look like across regions? I could sense that probably like this is an interest of like research from the one that asked the questions. Yeah, please, Ms. Rosio.
Thank you very much, Secker, and also thank you very much for the question. And let me try to respond to this question with the work we normally do. So I think it's nice to take the example of the FRA, this Global Forest Resources Assessment. So it's more than monitoring data, it's accompanying countries to report data and to, the mandate of FAO is to also disseminate information that is directly coming from countries. So the FRA, I think, example is the most interesting one, because the FRA process is based on a network that is called the FRA National Correspondence. This is the highest level of forestry officials in each of the countries. For the FRA 2025, we have 236 countries and territories that belong to this network, and FAO, together with countries, actually are able to work together to disseminate relevant data, as I mentioned. So more than monitor, I think we work together with the countries to make this data available, that will be then useful for many processes, including the reporting, for instance, of the SDGs 15, etc. So this is the link. This is the accompany process. Related to the regions, I have to say that this is a similar process. One of the examples I provided was this National Forest Inventory network in the region, in the Latin American region. We are actually next week facilitating one also in the Asia Pacific region, and hopefully soon we will have another in Africa. So this is a process where FAO is facilitating actually a knowledge exchange and experience among different countries of the region, where data is the key aspect, not only for improving data collection, analysis, and dissemination, but helping all this process, all this framework actually helps to improve the data, and that data ends up in decision making. So this is, I think, the two examples will help better understand which is the role of FAO when talking about data and how this is linked to these processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rosio. Yeah, we have more questions now, like from the anonymous, but there's actually one question coming to my chat, like to the direct chat in the Zoom. I would just like to read it because it's actually like a real case study. Dear moderator, I want to ask a question via Slido, but unfortunately it doesn't fit, so I prefer this to be anonymous. In my country, one of the major challenges in the forestry sector is the change of the government. The new administration does not prioritize forestry or climate change, and has even stated that palm oil are also trees. Additionally, 2 million hectares of land will be cleared for other programs like food and energy. And to make matters worse, the current Minister of Forestry has no background in forestry at all. Therefore, my questions are for Dr. Kirchner, IUFRO. Is it necessary and even possible for various forestry research institutions to take a stronger stance in influencing government decision, especially in this kind of political situation. And a question for Ms. Rosio from FAO is like, to what extent can FAO under the United Nations can pressure the government to prevent further harmful actions? Or probably like I would reformulate it like, to what extent can FAO like have leverage like under its position under the United Nations? So yeah, I'd like to give it to Dr. Kirchner first.
Thank you very much for this questions. This is really not easy to answer if you have not a stable government which is not existing in this country. And I would argue from the perspective also from the Rio model, which information channels exist between research and political strong actors, and this is unstable here in this moment. And I would like to say that you have to focus on governance processes. So which other important actors are active to influence forest policy and to make political decisions, maybe outside from the country, international organizations. And it would be very beneficial to see this existing actor network to influence the government, if it is possible. I don't know the situation there, but to implement a real exchange between research and ministries or government, that's not easy in this unstable situation. Yeah, sorry for that not sufficient answer.
Yeah, no, like,
but we can talk later. See my email address and
yeah, Dr. Kirchner had shared his email address. So like, if you would like to discuss them, like you for like the one that asked the question, you could send email to Dr. Kirchner for further discussion, I think. So for Ms. Rosio, probably do you probably would like to answer about the question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I just
so like in this kind of like different political situation, like in between countries, like what is the leverage of FAO like as a body under United Nations? Like how far could it actually provide like policy support and etc.?
Thank you, Sekar. Yes. I think, first of all, for those who have joined the webinar, it's important to know that FAO has a series of offices. No, we have an office in headquarters. I'm here based in headquarters. There are regional offices, sub-regional offices, and country offices. So we normally work as a team. And again, I want to bring an example. Yesterday, I received a call from a country in Latin America, and from the FAO country office, actually. And there was a specific request from the government to deal with some aspects related to the forest sector. And actually, what happens is that FAO accompanies not only the regional offices, but also the country offices to bring an answer and sometimes solutions to some of the requests that we get from the country. So I would say that our role is mainly to accompany governments to take the right decision, help them also understand some elements. So I would say that the role of FAO is to facilitate the process also in countries of multiple stakeholders to get into the right decision, including the forest sector, of course. So the role is more on providing recommendations on how to deal, and those recommendations are coming from, of course, the most relevant information that we have in hand. No? So if a country needs to take a decision on, okay, I want to go to the forest and collect data on the field, which is the type of solution you can offer to me? or if there are guidance from FAO on how to improve our national forest monitoring system. So we are there to provide insights on how to deal with it and accompany countries and governments to take a decision. Back to you, Seker. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the clear answer to that. And we still actually have 5 minutes for this Q&A session. And I saw somebody has been raising the hand throughout the Q&A session. So I would give the last question, or like last chance for the question, like last 5 minutes, to Nadine from Forest Experience. Yeah, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, good morning.
Yes.
Thank you very much, first of all, for this series of very interesting presentations. My name is Nadine Grüserstan. I'm currently working as a certified forest guide from Brussels. I'm actually joining you from Brussels. And in my previous 15 years of professional life, I have actually worked directly with decision makers as a policy advisor also here at the European Union. So I perhaps wanted to say a few words from the other side between the science and policy gap, which in my experience also is a very important one to bridge. And basically there are ways and means to doing this. First of all, when you look at policymakers and politicians, of course, they are generalists. And I think in some of the presentations, it became clear that the challenge you specifically as scientists have to really bring the experience, the knowledge to policymakers and to basically see an impact. Now, what policymakers expect also from scientists is really to get this knowledge into digestible pieces that they can use for their actions. So this is one of the first things that I think is crucial, to make sure that all the knowledge, the scientific knowledge, and also what the FAO colleague has presented in terms of amazing brochures that are there. But if you meet a policymaker, they would like to see actionable things to do in their daily political life, so to say. Second thing that is important if you want to really influence policy making is actually to know your audience, to make sure you have the correct timing also for approaching politicians, and specifically with forestry or with climate change. Of course, these are long processes, but nevertheless, there's always a window of opportunity, as Dr. Kirchner has actually presented, to really plug in your knowledge. May that be that via workshops, via presentations, via also personal meetings with members of parliament, be that at national level or at European level. So there are actually also ways and means. And one of the other important part is to connect forestry with other political fields, be that forests and health, forests and food and agriculture, as also the FAO colleague has said, forests and economy, forests and the role of climate change. So to make sure that the connection is there, and it's not just forestry or forest policy, but how the topic can actually contribute also to other policy fields. So to move it out of a silo and to actually make sure it is a bit more horizontal in policy making and then become concrete. So in the end, I think what I want to say, there is so much knowledge and also in terms of the science that is there from your side. So it's important to pitch that to policymakers in a way that they can present also and use actionable solutions for their daily work. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nadine. Actually, it was the remarks from Nadine actually helps me to conclude the session, and also like perfectly gives closure to the first session of our dialogue. I would like to summarize a bit, and it is also like great to hear from an expert that is also like on the ground. Like, thank you so much, Nadine, for sharing the experience and also your expertise. Nadine also already mentioned that like there are like three somehow like ways to influence policy, like from like science first, like there has to be like actionable things, because as mentioned by Dr. Kirschner and from IUFRO, that science and policy, they are operating with different rationalities and responsibilities. And then second, to know the audience and to know the time, especially when it comes to forest policy, it's usually long processes. It also has been emphasized during the presentation of Dr. Kirschner. And the last one is to perhaps connect forestry to other political field. And this also has been emphasized and also like has been presented by Ms. Rossio from FAO in like the example of like how connecting the forestry issue with like the agri-food issues in the data provision, and also like in enabling the transparency of the data. Thank you so much for the first half of the session. Thank you to our speakers, to Dr. Kirschner and also to Ms. Rossio for your insightful presentations, your answers, and also to the audience for your thoughtful questions. And now we are moving to the next part of the session, the second part of the session, which is not less exciting, like it is also as exciting as the first part. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Helga Pulzel, Assistant Director for Policy Support at the European Forest Institute. She is also the IUFRO Working Party 90501 on bioeconomic policy. So without further ado, Dr. Pulzel, the time is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm trying to share my slide. Okay. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me to this exciting dialogue. And you will see in a moment how the dialogue actually works also through the slides. So I'm really happy to be part of this. In the brochure that you have sent out to the speakers, you talked about policy advice. We at EFI, we call it policy support, and I will explain in a moment why we call it policy support. So now I don't know why this slide goes automatically, but let's see. Okay, but first of all, before I go into explaining how we understand policy support, I would like to say a little bit about the European Forest Institute, because I'm not sure how much everyone knows about us. So we are an international organization. We are based on an international convention, and it's ratified by 30 member countries. You can see the countries on these slides. It's European states. But in addition to the 30 member countries, we also have about 125 member organizations. So this is really annoying that I don't know why it's playing itself. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay, sorry for that. So what I wanted to say is for the 25 member organizations, these are universities, but also research organizations, and you can see the blue dots that represent these member organizations. And I assume that some of the students that are part in this dialogue, but also professionals, actually had done their PhD or their degrees in these organizations, but not only. But then let me say a little bit about EFI itself. Our headquarters is in Joensuu in Eastern Finland, where we host a research program on bioeconomy, but also the policy support facility and the bioregions facility. But then we have also offices in Rome with the Biocities facility, in Barcelona with the Mediterranean facility, the International Partnership facility, and the Genetic Resource facility, and one in Bonn that hosts the research program on resilience and governance. And then we have a liaison office in Brussels. And last but not least, we have a regional office in Malaysia.
As you can see from the data on the slide, we have about 160 staff members, and we are truly international because nearly every fourth employee is from a different nationality, which makes it really exciting to work at EFI. The average age for now is 41, but believe me, there's older colleagues, but there's also a lot of more younger colleagues, and we are constantly looking for talent, for more junior and also more seasoned talent. The gender balance is very nice because we are nearly the same amount, whether it's male or female staff members. But now let me dive into the topic of today, policy support. For us, policy support is clearly linking knowledge to action. And what I mean by that is I would like to give you a few examples on how we do that. But before doing that, I would also like to embed it in theoretical concepts. And I'm really happy that Mr. Kirchner has provided this more theoretical presentation before, because now for me it's very easy to link my presentation up to this. So when we talk about the science expertise policy interface, very often we talk about this linear push model. In other words, like science and expertise generates facts that are then presented to politics or decision makers. But as we have heard from Mr. Kirchner, this value-free fact presentation doesn't really work that way. Also because science and expertise is not value-free. It's already on how methods are selected, on which topic you're selected. This is based on individuals' preferences, individuals' scientists' preferences and experts' preferences. So this linear push model has been criticized quite a lot, and we have also heard this in Mr. Kirchner's presentation. But then as a reaction to that, as we have seen previously, there's this supply and demand model that was presented in the literature, also called pull model. So in other words, you can see here that the interface between science, expertise, and politics gets already a little bit more blurred and is less closed in the initial model. So here, politics asks questions to scientists and expertise, and then scientists and experts are expected to supply the answers to politics so that decision makers can make the decisions based on facts. But again, this supply and demand model has been quite criticized because this interface between science and expertise isn't so clear, and politics isn't so clear-cut as this model presents itself. So I would like to extend this model now into something that we call co-production or partnership model, and that you can find in the literature as well. And here, the science and policy interface is much more blurred and actually connected to each other. But the co-production model clearly is based on not only trust and dialogue between science, expertise, and politics, but also science and expertise works in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary methods. So in other ways, it embeds also stakeholders, practitioners into their work and uses multi-methods and works, of course, also transnational. And this is exactly the idea that we base our policy support in EFI on. But listening to Mr. Kirchner when he said there's this third form, this embedded model, I totally agree with him. But this embedded model is, as we presented here, maybe embedded more already in the science and expertise way we deal with it. But I would say that the way to involve citizens is much harder because you need to interest citizens in the topic and also give something back so that they feel there is a value to participate. But clearly, what you have also heard in Mr. Kirchner's presentation is that in the political sphere, the decision-making is interest-driven, and so lobbying clearly belongs to the political sphere and not to the science and expertise sphere. And I would like to actually point this out. And now let's go to EFI's policy support and how we do that. We have 5 ways in providing policy support. The first one, the provision of knowledge and expertise. I think this is something that everyone here in the room has come across. So you read scientific articles, reports, book chapters, and that's what we, of course, also engage with. And the second form of policy support is the translation form, and we put quite a lot of emphasis in this to actually make this scientific knowledge accessible. As we have also heard from Nadine, policymakers would like to have actionable bites, so we need to invest in these actionable bites and make sure that decision makers that are no experts in the field can understand what the scientists are saying without jargon, so to say. And then the third form is more like synthesizing and contextualizing knowledge. We cannot expect that decision makers understand what the scientific knowledge for a certain aspect is and how it develops over time, or what is empirically really sound and proven. So we try to synthesize the scientific knowledge and also contextualize it to questions that policymakers have. But then bridging is the fourth policy support function. So bridging between expertise, science, and practice. And this is not only a one-way bridging where we inform the practice level about the latest results, but it's also a learning exercise. And there this co-production comes in, where we actually also learn from the practitioners and forest owners and managers on the ground to also make the scientific and expert questions in the right way. And the last way is the facilitation of dialogue. And I think this is really important because here we bring together scientists, decision and policymakers, stakeholders and experts, and also the interested public to engage in dialogue and to hear about latest results and ask questions to scientists and also to decision makers. And I would now like to show you a few examples on how we do this policy support in EFI. So my first example goes to the translation function. As I said before, we cannot expect policymakers to be able to read scientific articles because sometimes they get really full of jargon. It's really also difficult to access. So what we try to provide is here a series of policy briefs. So it's 500 to 600 words in easily accessible and phrased in a way that also the general public could access this. And last year, for instance, we concentrated on 4 topics: payments for ecosystem services, health and urban forests, carbon farming in forests is a new topic that the European Commission introduced more recently, and then the restoration and forest resilience, a really important topic for the forest of the future. But then we thought politicians and decision makers, but of course also students, we all Google and we want to know what is the latest with regards to a specific topic, which we might not be experts in. So we introduced a new series and was launched a month ago. It's called the What Is series. And here we try to answer questions in an easy way, again, accessible language with graphs that support it. But then there's always a few words on how the what's the latest status of knowledge. Then for the third way of policy support that we do, this synthesizing and contextualizing of knowledge, I would like to share some information about our latest reports. So here last year we published a report on sustainable finance and biodiversity criteria, and this was very important because the European Commission, was about to develop a delegated act on sustainable finance, and they had to come up with forest biodiversity criteria. Here scientists got together to actually show what's the latest scientific knowledge with regards to biodiversity criteria, also based in international and regional reporting requirements and linked to that. And reporting on biodiversity is really a difficult one. Then the second report was on carbon farming in the European forest sector. As I said before, that's a topic that came up more recently. This is to store more carbon in forests by managing it in a way that the carbon is stored more long-term and intensified, so to say. And here the scientists brought together the latest knowledge on this. And the last report I would like to share with you that you might find interesting to read is a forthcoming one. And the forthcoming one is on EU wood policy governance. And here we analyzed the way that European legislation and policies have an impact on wood use and wood per se. And we tried to collect the legal and non-legal instruments in this publication. But then there's also a special chapter on wood construction that some of you might find interesting. But now for the bridging function. I think for the bridging function, we really would like to reach out to our stakeholders and bring scientists, practitioners, and decision makers together. And one example of reaching out or bridging is this Materoscope demo sites. Maybe some of you have already visited some of our demo sites. You can see on the map they are all over Europe, currently in 22 countries, and we support this. And these Materoscopes, they can be considered something like a training site. They're usually 1 hectare big, and all trees are numbered, mapped, and recorded. And we use evaluation or simulation software where similar selection exercises can actually be performed. So another way you can actually learn and exchange knowledge on how you do forest management. So you can select trees for specific to reach specific goals, and then with this, once everyone has selected, this can then be discussed in the forest, and also the consequences of this management can be discussed, and it creates quite an interesting setup. Then the last form of policy support is the facilitation of dialogue. And here the facilitation of dialogue, we have different formats, and I brought some examples here how we facilitate dialogue. So on the one side, we have these Think Forest events, and maybe some of you have already participated. If not, there is a chance to participate in one on carbon farming on the 7th of April. It will be a webinar seminar. And this Think Forest seminar brings together high-level policymakers, but also scientists and practitioners, and to dialogue about the topic in question. But then we also bring our decision makers and policy makers, as well as scientists and practitioners, to the forest. And here's examples where the Integrate Network met to discuss forest management and biodiversity conservation methods in the forest. And it's always good to see it in the setup and what consequences it brings. And then a new form of facilitation of dialogue is the Helsinki Forest Talks with diplomats, where we, together with 2 embassies, organize meetings where the ambassadors invite their fellow diplomats, and we discuss topics about forests. So the next one, for instance, will be organized by the Dutch embassy and the Belgian embassy, And together we will discuss the topic of forest resources. There's always a keynote followed by a panel discussion, and then the diplomats can, of course, ask a lot of questions. And it's really exciting new format. Another example where EFI presents the secretariat of implementation mechanism of Forest Europe, and we will hear about Forest Europe in a moment. And this IUFRO stands short for a collaborative program on forest genetic resources. And in this IUFRO program, there is a very strong collaboration between policymakers and scientists. It's, of course, a government-driven consensus, but here the governments exchange on the latest scientific knowledge and also share innovations and challenges. And then the latest scientific knowledge on forest genetic resources produced by scientists is gathered and translated to policymakers in many ways. So that's another example. But then I would like to also introduce an example of how we network. And this one is the Young Leadership Program. And in the Young Leadership Program, as you can see, we have organized many based in Joensuu, and then also the last 3 ones based in Barcelona. But the upcoming one will be in May in Croatia on forest resilience. And in this Young Leadership Program, we aim to develop and nurture the leadership potential of individuals in their early stage of professional or personal development. So it targets individuals that are less than 35 years old, and it provides great opportunities to network with their peers, but also experts, and to share also practical experience and work on soft skills, which we consider really important. So all in all, let me summarize what roles we have in policy support. So in EFI, we generate knowledge, but as I said before, we also synthesize knowledge, and then we aggregate it in different forms to translate it to decision makers. But then we also act as knowledge brokers in the facilitation of dialogue. And sometimes, but rather rarely, we act as knowledge advocates. And this is mostly in relation to research funding, research topics that may have not so much leverage at this point. These roles in policy support are non-exclusive, so scientists and experts can have these roles at different times. And you might like to think about it, what's the role that you take during your career? I think that's an interesting question for everyone to take. But now let me conclude. As I said before, it's quicker than I want to say. Co-production between scientists, experts, and policymakers is really important because it's based on dialogue and trust. And we aim to really work on this co-production side and not just transfer ready-made knowledge to policymakers and aim to and hope that they taken it up. And we have different forms of policy support at EFI that connect also to these various roles that scientists and experts take. But as you have also seen from my examples, we engage with and in different communities, and these stretch from the European to the national to the local level. What I have not talked about it so much is about the global level, but we also engage in the global south. With this, thank you so much for your attention. And I look forward to the question later on.
Yeah, thank you so much once again, Dr. Pilzer, for sharing how networks and partnerships are facilitated in the framework of regional collaboration. And we already learned, like especially in Europe, and how co-productive processes take place We learned also how the actually like scientific, how it is actually possible for scientific institution and government to closely collaborate, as Dr. Pulsar previously mentioned, like program like, for example, EU for Gen. So maybe like if you're interested about this program, you could look it up further like in the EFI website. And perhaps one additional information from Dr. Pulsar that probably also caught your attention and also probably is of your interest is like the Young Leadership Program that EFI is having. Probably you could also check it out in the EFI website about the Young Leadership Program, because I believe that it is also like of a huge interest of all the participants here who are mostly young professionals in forestry and also the students like me. And yeah, we have heard from the supply side of the research side. Now, last but not least, we are going to welcome Mr. Frederick Silverbrand, the international coordinator from Forest Europe. We are going to uncover more about the demand for research expertise in policymaking and how this institution has addressed institutional and systemic barriers in the science policy interface. And yeah, Mr. Silverbrand, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I will try to share my screen. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Sekar. Nice to be here. I am a bit off. I have a really bad headache and fever, but I try and do my best. I work for the Swedish Forest Agency. I work with the Forest Restoration Program in Africa and Asia, but I'm also part of the Liaison Unit Sweden. Sweden is the chair of, or the Minister of Rural Affairs, or the chair of Forest Europe this 2 years, 2025 and 2026. And to support that and make things happen, he needs a secretariat working for him, and that's the Liaison Unit Sweden, which I'm part of. It's led by Ebba Henning-Plank, who is also here in the meeting, or have been at least. And I will, the Forest Europe is, as you said, the other side, the policy process, and it's very much based on science. So I think it's a good example how you can work from the policy side to include science in policy. And what we will work with these coming years was decided. Forest Europe is a high-level policy process with 45 signatories and like 65 observers. The signatories is 44 countries in the pan-European area and the European Union. And it's been ongoing since 1990, and the last chairman was Germany, and in Bonn it decided what Forest Europe will continue work with, and that's what happened, and our work, and we have of course based our work program on that. And what was said was to continue, because this policy process is all about sustainable forest management. So we work a lot with criteria and research or promote sustainable forest management. But Forest Europe have had some issues as it's a volunteer process. It's been kind of hard to finance and find the support and also the succession of shares. So that's also part of to find the stability in the process. That is also what we will work with, except for advancing sustainable forest management during this period. So therefore we have 3 working areas. We have 2 work streams, and that's to continue. The first one is to continue working with sustainable forest management. The other one is, we have renamed it, but here it says the future of Forest Europe. I don't remember what the new name was, but it was it's about finding a sustainable way to work with Forest Europe. And then we have areas of continued and emerging interests, working with all of these activities that have been under the Forest Europe umbrella, like EFROGEN that was mentioned before. I will go into that a bit more later, but also green jobs, how to promote decency in work in the forest sector, how to support and include the youth, like IFSA, how you can be part of this policy process, that you're invited to the meetings, so you're included in the policy process, for example. And that's what will be my responsibility during the chairmanship, these areas of continued and emerging interests. So let's go into how Forest Europe work with this policy process, or including science in policy. And the main activity is the ministerial conference. It's one ministerial conference for each chairmanship. So it's we had the 9th in October last year for the German chairmanship, and we will have the 10th next summer in June in Sweden. And for this ministerial conference, it's then decisions are taken how to continue to work sustainably, and how Forest Europe can support policy making in of course based on science policy making in the European, the signatory countries, these 44 different countries, and also the European Union. So this process have a big impact on forest policy in Europe. And of course, it's based on science, which I will show soon. We have other examples of how it supports. For example, maybe one of the most important, just as FAO are making the state of the world's forests, Forest Europe together with FAO and UNECE work with State of Europe's forests. And it's also released every 5th year. So it was released in 2020, and December this year it will also be released. And and it's this time it's the European Forest Institute who is writing the report under the umbrella of Forest Europe. And of course, it's extremely important to have the current state of the forests and the trends to be able to take good decisions for the policymakers. And I truly agree with, was it Nadia, who talked about promoting, how to promote. You have to really take and give policymakers possible actions if you want to make the changes. We can all be change agents. We can all promote and work with policy making, but we really have to give them viable options to decide the right, what we think from a science-based approach, the right action. And of course, we talked about EFROGEN before. It's part of the Forest Europe umbrella, but it's operated by the European Forest Institute. It's very old. It's a database of all the tree species in Europe, and I think that's key to fighting climate change. When we see that things will happen we have to have the right tree on the right growing conditions, and if we in the right location, and if we can work with that in this database, and when the climate change is coming, or it have already, of course, started, we can of course use the right tree at the right spot. Sorry for being a bit, one new process or activity under Forest Europe, also managed by EFI, is the FORESC. It was decided last year in the bond ministerial decision to include forest risk facility under EFI to work with the risks, much due to climate change. The risks in forest, both biotic and abiotic, are increasing with the climate change. This activity will continue to support the signatories how to manage forests in a risk perspective. So that's also an important part, an important policy or science-based policy process. And then I go into an example what you can use these data from the SOF, the State of Europe's Forests, because we have today, or at least 2015, the World Resource Institute stated that we have in Europe around 400 million hectares that is need. We have the opportunity to restore that. We have a lot deforested world, and we really have an opportunity to do something about that. We can also work with storing carbon from trees. There was a report a couple of years back that we have to build 96,000 housing units each day for the next 30 years. And I believe that if we build that in concrete and steel that evaporates a lot of carbon, then we have a huge problem. We have our forests that are degraded all around the globe. And we can hopefully in the future find a solution where we can restore our forests and also store a lot of carbon in cities. We had to create the demand, and then we can also, the demand of forest products will speed up the restoration efforts globally. And if we go into the State of Forest Europe, it looks positive. 1990 we had like 8 billion megaton of carbon. 2020, it was in the last report, it was almost 12 billion megaton of carbon. 12 billion megaton of carbon. And that's an increase of 50%. But if we see, I don't know at all how they measure this. I'm really interested to know that. But per capita, we had stored in forest products, we had stored 2.5 ton of carbon per capita 1990. But 2015, it was 2.8 ton, an increase of 10%. So we really need to do both. Of course, we have to store more carbon in our forest, but we also have to store more carbon in products. And I think it's very interesting that we can use these trends to see how and what is happening. And that's really key and important for policymaking. So I think that was what I was going to say. Thank you. Sorry for my coughing, and hopefully I was not too unclear. I feel it. My brain isn't working as usually.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Silverbrand, also for that excellent presentation, especially given that you're not feeling your best today and you're not fit today. We really appreciate your effort and then your dedication and your time to come here and to share with us. And I would like to invite everyone to send a virtual round of applause or confetti as a gesture of support and wishes for a speedy recovery for Mr. Silverbrand. Thank you so much. And
Thank
it's
you.
also, yeah, it's also eventually refreshing to hear a perspective from a government, from the government side, especially on how science informs policy making and where it is most needed, like from the demand side. So now, finally, to the most awaited session, we are going to enter to the final Q&A session. Please feel free to share any remaining questions. If you have questions, please feel free to just join us at Slido, enter slido.com and then enter the number that is provided in the screen, or just screen the barcode that is provided here. Or you could also write it in the chat if you think that the words or the characters limitation in the Slido is not fitting for your question. So yeah, I would go through the slide of question. Now probably we're back to Dr. Pulzel. There's a question from somebody from MPI, I believe that's Max Planck Institute. How can we ensure that the co-produced science includes vulnerable and underrepresented groups before it reaches political decision makers? Yeah, please, Dr. Pulzel.
I think that's a very interesting question, and I believe all the scientists that work at this co-production sites actually should take this serious, but also experts should take this serious, because it's not only a role for science, it's also a role for experts, because we tend to go back to the ones we know and not necessarily tend to include the one we don't know. But I have to say, in order to make them include, they also have to want to be included. So it's both sides. And I think we certainly have to work harder to make sure that those groups are also included. But it's definitely a tricky question, I would say.
Thank you so much for your answer. Maybe another question that I think is probably, because there's no specific address to this question, but I think it is more relevant to be asked to you. There is this question from Anonymous in the case of the payment for ecosystem services, because you mentioned about it briefly. Do you think is it a science-based policy or science-shaped to fit political priorities? I think it's been thought-provoking.
Yes, I appreciate thought-provoking questions, and I gladly had a little bit of time to think about it. And I would say I'm advantaged in this aspect, because I know from a PhD student at Boku University that has put together more than 160 cases globally on payment for ecosystem services, and it starts in 1986. And if you relate to this, you would say it's not science, it's both. It's science-based, but maybe also science fit or shaped in a way, or fit to purpose, because the payment for ecosystem service narrative has reached the European and the global scale maybe at a later stage. But payment for ecosystem services have already been done, but mostly in the global south. So we could also learn from the global south on what the best practices are there and what works and what doesn't work so well. So I think this is a very interesting case here. But my tendency would say, I would say it existed before it reached the political arena.
Thank you so much. We actually have so many questions in this in the second session, through Slido. I think people start to get used to use Slido now. I think to give a bit more break to Mr. Silverbrand, I would like to ask again to Dr. Pulzer, there is this question, I think it's probably is best addressed to EFI as well. Like every year, thousands of applied research in forestry are done around the world and also published probably, but their implementation is scarce. What do you suggest for this to change?
Maybe I see this a little bit more positive than the person that had asked the question. I do think that actually implementation is not so bad after all, but I feel that we need to make sure that we actually also work together more so that we talk to each other and not just aim to publish in the scientific journal, but exchange also and then try to condense our messages and maybe also show where they are critical to each other and even say the opposite and explain why it's saying the opposite. And while I'm saying that, I would like to ask or call for more inter and transdisciplinary research, because I truly think that at this transdisciplinary research sites, there is the novelty that also decision makers and policymakers really need to be made aware of. But certainly it is a big challenge.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. And there is this question that has been posted since the first session, but I think it is also very relevant for this session as well. And this is like for both EFI and Forest Europe. Probably this time I would go to Mr. Silke Brandfas. Do you think scientific processes can be too slow to be useful for urgent on-the-ground decisions, especially that you're speaking from the government side? What do you think about it?
I do think that, yeah, scientific processes can be slow, but also processes in policymaking can be even slower. And yeah, and too slow. I'm not sure that they can be too slow. I think that to be scientific, you really need them to be scientific, and then they have to take time to really find what they're supposed to do. Now I'm just talking gibberish, I feel. But I think that scientific processes have to take their time. But I think that on the ground, I am more of a forester practitioner, and on the ground you have to take these practical decisions and then just to do, and then science might come and make either verify what I'm doing or change my perspective, but then I have to be open for these changes. I'm not sure if it was a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And what do you think about it, Dr. Pluse? Especially, we know that like in the science production, it probably takes slow because there's this process of like making sure that the science that is produced is credible. But at the same time, like, do you think also, like, do you see that there is a possibility or like there's ways or like pathways to actually accelerate the process itself? What do you think about it?
Well, we think a lot about this in the sense that we try to address this question of when windows of opportunity open and then scientific knowledge should be ready, so to say, and is this possible? What we do at EFI is we try to constantly screen the horizon. In other words, we try to see what are the topics that are coming up in the future and actually try to, with foresight methods also, advance topics for the future. But of course, you cannot advance everything because the political process is messy, and then some topics come up at a time where nobody could foresee that. And I think we are all aware that this war in Ukraine would have not been something that somebody would have foreseen easily. So in other words, I think science should be useful, but not always. There should also be science that is not meant to be useful at this moment, but this is then the science that provides for innovation in the future. And I think we should also make sure that both science, applied science, but also this other science has sustainable funding. But I also do think that there is expertise on the ground from the forest managers and the forest owners that should also be collected on indigenous people. And I think they should be integrated in the scientific process as well. Maybe this is more complex, but could help us maybe to advance for decisions that are necessary in the future.
Thank you so much. It is actually quite interesting to actually that both of you are like having the same opinions, that like it's not only the scientific process that can be slow, but also like the political process could be also slow. I mean, like both processes like take quite a time, and also the forestry itself, like the nature of like the forest policy or like forest decision making, it should be also like in the long term. Probably it also is why like it takes time in like both like political and also like in the scientific processes. And now there's a question particularly for the Forest Europe, which is quite interesting. Like since EU is submitting NDC, as NDC is the nation determination contribution, if some of you are not familiar with that term, since EU is submitting NDC as one entity, how to ensure that countries in EU are following the same action plans? Probably like you could all answer this like in the direction of like the forestry sector, especially with like the biodiversity strategy and also like the EU forest strategy. Mr. Silverbrand, if you may.
I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that. Ebba, can you add something?
Maybe I can add something to help you out.
That would be good. Okay, thank you.
In the European Union, they have a clear policy on how to fight climate change, and they also have clear targets. Every country reports to the European Union how they meet these targets, and then together they submit the report to the UN. But I would say it shows already that the current carbon sink in forest is declining in some European countries. So to reach the targets in the European Union might be more difficult in the future than it was in the past.
Yeah, I think it is quite interesting because like it is quite interesting question. Probably I could also relate to this question somehow, because like many countries in the world, they are submitting NDC like it's one country, and it is already a complicated process, and like EU is submitting as one entity. It's like it is such an like unimaginable complicated process. That's why probably the person who is asking this question. And interestingly, I think this question is triggering other questions that is more related to the global south, or like what is happening in the global south, because I see the other two questions are related to the global south countries. First question from the global south citizen is what strategies bridge the gap between scientific research and policy making in global south countries with limited recognition of science in policy processes? Probably Dr. Pulsel, you could answer this.
I feel that's a very complex question that I cannot ad hoc answer, but I would assume that all the activities that we do should actually incorporate the science and expertise, and we in EFI we try to do that in that way when we work in the global south. But I cannot really provide a more comprehensive answer to this question because it's really complex. Because what's the global south? The countries differ a lot in their economic feasibilities, in their social and environmental context. So I think it's really hard to say that. And I know too less about individual global country to really give a good answer here.
Yeah, perhaps this dialogue sparks the curiosity of some of our students in the global South countries, because probably it is somehow like a new concept to see like how EFI and Forest Europe are working, and probably it is not something that is probably existing in like some countries. That's probably, I can only assume like the rationale behind the question. But if you, like whoever asked this question, would like to speak up and also like unmute yourself, like please, I invite you to also like raise your hand to clarify this further. Yeah,
I can try to have some answer. I work in some countries in Asia and Africa, and I think it's a succession all of the time that you have, okay, in Laos, you still have shifting cultivation. It's like, okay, from Sweden's perspective, it's 150 years ago. And then you have everything in between the countries that do. And yeah, we have come further in Europe with the policy making and also with the research. And I think the key thing is that, okay, don't get let down that it looks different over the world. Just we have to learn from each other. We have to learn from what's happening in Europe or in the North, but don't make the same mistakes that we have done. We have, during a long period of time, we didn't take biodiversity into consideration. So we really have to, we can learn from the science in the global North and the policy making. And I think that's the key thing we do in the program that we have, according to the last question too, is that we bring people from these countries and then we show them, okay, this is what we have done in Sweden. We have done good things, we have done bad things. How can you use that in your context? I think that's the key thing to do, not to say, okay, you should do like this, or you should plant a lot of trees and send them money to plant trees, but show them what we have done and examples that we have, and try to avoid so that it can be a quicker from where they are now to where they must be to restore their forests. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it is also worth mentioning because it is quite relevant to like the next dialogue that we are going to hold. Like our second dialogue is going to focus more on talking about like the upscaling the local wisdoms from the global South, and like how decoupling the forestry emission using like this local wisdom. I think this is quite just a spoiler and like a promotion for like for the next dialogue. So if you would like to have like further discussion about it, please stay tuned in our social media, and we're going to post or publish about this information soon in our social media. And eventually the question and answer session is already over. Like it's already over 2 minutes ago, but there's actually one last question. I think the person who asked will be sad if they're left, like their question is like the only one that is left. So I would like to just ask this question, and probably like short, like just you could both of you could like shortly answer to this question, because quite interesting with the current messy discussion on foreign aid. I believe this is because of the coverage of like foreign aid in like many media outlets like in The Economist and also in the New York Times, and probably it's also because of the discussion due to since the Trump administration is also cutting foreign aid now. There's a question that, do you think foreign aid is the right and effective agent to lobby science in especially global South? Maybe I would like to ask this to Dr. Pulzel first, because you mentioned about lobbying, and also to Mr. Silverbrand, because we know that like there are many foreign aids that are also coming from European countries. Yeah, please.
Well, when I said address lobbying, I addressed this, that lobbying is taking place in the political sphere. So decision makers are lobbied to take decisions that are in line with the one organization that lobbies it in. But I think this question is different. This question is about whether actually foreign aid is used to lobby science. And I have to say, I have not an answer to that, neither whether it's done or whether it should be done. So I'm afraid I cannot help here.
Thank you. Mrs. Silverbrand, if you probably have answer.
No, I think that showing what is happening and how you can do it is more important than lobbying. Okay, this work in our context, but the context is not that far. Many of us work in the same way. So I think that's just to show how it works is more efficient than lobbying. And I think the countries have to build their own, but they have to cut corners. As I tried to explain before, I included that question in my previous answer, is that we have to show how things can be done, and then the South or the aid countries can build their own system from that. So I think that's kind of the key.
Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. And yeah, thank you once again to all of our speakers. Like, thank you, Dr. Pulser, and thank you, Mr. Silverbrand, for the presentation, and also like the insightful and engaging discussion, the fruitful discussion as well. And thank you to you, especially the audiences that have sent us questions and making this discussion more alive. And thank you for being so engaged until now. Like, it's almost like 2 hours, like more than 2 hours already, and you're still like high spirited in participating in this dialogue. So yeah, as we wrap up today's dialogue, we would like to reflect on what we have learned, that bridging the gap between bridging the gap between science and policy isn't only about communicating results, it's also about building long-term relationships between the policy actors and also the scientific actors itself, and also understanding the political realities, like not only the political realities, but also like the scientific realities, and also empowering the voices that are included in, or not included in the process. So I don't want to make the wrap up so long, because eventually the conversation, or like this dialogue, doesn't end here. Based on today's dialogue, actually IFSA will furtherly prepare a statement summarizing the key insights and youth perspective on science to policy transfer in the forestry sector. And this will be shared in future engagements with partners and institutions. We make sure that all of the speakers here get copy before we publish it, of course, and we would like to hear your feedback, of course, for our statement that we are going to prepare. Therefore, we hope that today's dialogue and discussion has left all of you inspired and more equipped to take part in this important journey. So thank you so much. And to officially close the dialogue, because we already officially opened this dialogue with the remarks from our president, now we are going to have the closing remarks from our external counselor, Rizka Afif, who makes this dialogue possible. He's the external counselor of IFSA, and he did his Bachelor of Science in Forestry in Universitas Gajah Mada. So please, the floor is yours, Rizka.
Thank you so much, Zakar. Happy International Day of Forest 2025. I'm Rizka Afif. I'm the external counselor of IFSA, or International Forestry Student Association, as Zakar mentioned beforehand, and recent graduate of Bachelor of Science and Forestry at Universitas Gajah Mada, Indonesia. On behalf of IFSA, we sincerely thank and express our gratitude for IFSA team, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as well as participants here. As someone from Indonesia, we are drastically having policy bias now. Just yesterday, and Indonesia is in chaos now, since this science to policy disintegration. That being said, this dialogue acts as our shared understanding that science and policy integration are pivotal for achieving the best product for better system circumstances. In IFSA, a student-based organization that is indeed close to science, we do believe that science can help identify important issues, broaden the range of policy options, and clarify relationships between objective and policies. Enhancing the role of forestry scientists is required because it is critically important in functioning democracy and to achieve a better forest policy. In recognition of the vital role forests play in science and policy, especially in the forestry sector, IFSA expanding awareness through advocacy and education, including grassroots actions at the local committees level and engaging in preparation for this year's World Agroforestry Congress in Kigali, Rwanda. We seek your collaborative support to make it happen. Additionally, there will be other IFSA Dialogue to commemorate the World Environment Day in June with the title Upscaling Local Wisdom, Decoupling Forestry Emission in Global South. We are happy to welcome you there all again. Back to the topic, clearly the decision maker needs scientists and science-based intermediary organizations that can synthesize the best science information in a format that is easily accessible, as IPCC is doing. But science policy support work has its own challenge. It can be impacted by pressures that mix science evidence with vested interest. So here are our next steps. How can we students and youth contribute? All in all, we can change it easily, but at least our contribution matters for collective action for a better today and tomorrow. Thank you, Scar.
Thank you so much, Rizka. And I would like to highlight once more one thing that Rizka has mentioned before, and also like to promote that we're going to have our second dialogue, particularly in talking about the upscaling local wisdom from the Global South, because today we have learned the examples and best practices as well, and how policy science policy transfer is happening in mostly in Europe. And in our next dialogue, we're going to also learn about the best practices and also the local wisdoms and how to upscale it to not only to the national but also to international level to decouple forestry emission. Therefore, please stay tuned in the social media of IFSA. The information will be out soon. And with that, we will close the session. But before we are ending the session, we would like to ask you to take a quick group photo for our publication. So please, everyone, we hope that you could be generous enough to turn on your cameras and also smile if you're comfortable. Yeah, I would stop sharing, right, Rizka?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I will stop sharing and let's take the picture. Who's going to take the picture?
Yeah, we have Rainy here to take
Yes,
okay.
I will take a picture.
Okay. Okay, great. So yeah. Okay. I will count to 1, 2, 3. Okay. Have you captured it?
Yes. You want to
Oh.
once more? Or
Once more. Okay. Yeah, once more with
okay.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, I get it.
Okay, now you get it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. With that, we officially conclude the IFSA Dialogue. Today, the first IFSA Dialogue on bridging science to policy transfer in the forestry sector. As mentioned, we are going to have the statement paper based on this session, and also based on our perspective from the young professional and also the students on this matter. We're going to follow you up on that in our social media. And thank you once again for your time, for your questions, for your engagement, and for your presence here today. We hope to see you again in the future, in the next IFSA Dialogues, in the next IFSA events, and in the next events that are conducted by our partners here. And happy International Day of Forests. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye. Thanks a lot.